Oh, look, I tell you what, I'm breaking down, but still, there we are. Anyway, I have my product placement on the floor here, so that if I should need lubrication, I shall get it very, very easily. Anyway, but you imagine being in bed on a school day at 7:40 in the morning? I don't know. Let me think. It would have taken 15 minutes to get to school, or thereabouts. Now, remember, I was only 6 at the time. And I may have hurried to school, I can't remember. But I just thought that was, a bit slovenly. Good for God's sake. Anyway, that was that one. Now, I'll just turn this around. I'll start at the top. Now, now this is dog's breakfast, because this is in any order of things I've thought of that was worth mentioning. I did some little programs on the school, but I think there's one thing that I hated. Oh, vile, 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 I can tell you. Above all else. Early in the piece, I don't know, maybe about 1946 perhaps, I think it was a government-initiated thing, but it was thought that, we were potentially malnourished. And so it became fashionable, I think throughout Queensland, maybe throughout Australia, to serve by volunteer ladies and prepare by volunteer ladies lunches called the Oslo lunch. Oh. I think they cost sixpence. And we would all line up on it one day a week, I think, for the Oslo lunch. Oh, God, I hated it. I think you'd pay sixpence and you'd line up there, in one of the buildings that's long since burnt down. You'd be in a line and you'd get 3 things, I think. You'd get a piece of fruit. Maybe the COD had become there by that time, I'm not sure. Anyway, you'd get a piece of fruit, and then you'd get a pack of unappetizing sandwiches, delicately cut, I might add, though, but, with things in it like a bit of lettuce and mashed egg or something. And then when you got to the end of the line, you had to have a plastic cup, I suppose. You got a cup of milk. From a dirty big, metal milk tub that had a big block of ice in it. Now, I hate milk. I hate milk with a passion. I think I must be lactose intolerant or something. The taste of it is absolutely vile. I'd have to sort of stick lots of chocolate and all that sort of thing in before I drink it, but God, I wouldn't touch milk with a 40-foot pole. But that was all part of the Oslo lunch. And it was supposed to be delicious and good for us. Oh, God. I don't know how long it lasted, but maybe it lasted a year or something like that. But when people tell you about the healthy Oslo lunch and all the good it was supposed to do us, look, if I have strength today, it was not through those Oslo lunches, it was through my father's hoggets, stolen hogget. That was the secret to my success, but not those Oslo lunches. God, they're bloody awful things. But I think they must have been very common. And it must have been a post-war thing, and we were going to bring health to the masses or something. Okay, now wait a minute. I'm going to be systematic now. I'll get rid of that one. Okay. Righto. Oh, now I did mention Dr. Roper, briefly, and in that last documentary, if you like, I mentioned the post office without mentioning Dr. Roper. Dr. Roper had caused offence for some reason or another. To someone, and he acquired a firearm, and he accosted Dr. Roper, on the post office steps. Now, Dr. Roper survived, and I don't know what happened to his assailant, but I just thought it was worth mentioning that it was on the old post office steps, of course. There was it was just painted in chocolate brown, and yeah, it was remodeled a couple of times in the 40s, early 50s, something like that. No, it must have been in the 40s it was remodeled. Made the counter very long. And but it was on those steps that Dr. Roper was accosted. Okay, then we'll get rid of that one. Now, there's one thing. I mentioned the Bellevue Cafe. And I told you about the wonderful things there, the toasted sandwiches, the untoasted sandwiches, the salads, the malted milks. And maybe you could get orange juice there too, I'm not quite sure. but the rocky road. But there was another thing that was ultra sophisticated. And you had to have, I think you could have a small one, or you could have a large one. I'm not sure. The small one were in bowls, circular bowls, like that. And the large ones were in longish sort of bowls. And they were called the sundae. Now, the sundae was made up of, one or two or three, whatever it may be, scoops of ice cream, sprinkled with nuts, and garnished with little cubes of jelly. And I think, they have a banana, and they have, I think people in vulgar places call them banana splits or something. But no. The sundae. And you'd have the sundae. Now, I don't know whether you got the banana with the small one or not. But if you wanted to be ultra sophisticated, like me having cappuccino at Peter Lurkis's cafe, well, it was the 1940s version of that. You'd have the sundae in the Bellevue. Oh, it was absolutely wonderful. And I felt, well, almost out of my class going into the Bellevue and asking for a sundae. Of course, how often would I have done that? You fancy I would never had the money. Maybe I watched other people have the sundae or something. But that was the classiest thing you could order in the Bellevue. Maybe young men, if they were trying to impress some girl, would probably take the girl to a sundae. So there we are. Okay, then now I've mentioned that one. Oh, yes. Shoes. Now, these days when we buy shoes, who fears new shoes? No one. Everyone wants new shoes. Oh, you have this and that. No, on and on it goes. And they're always comfortable. But that was not so in the 40s. Buying or getting new shoes was sometimes a matter of really urgent necessity, because very often shoes in those days, had leather heels and soles. The heel, of course, wore down at an angle like that. But the soles used to wear it with big holes in them. And, only when you had really big holes would you decide, well, you'd go to Hubert Marshall and you'd get them fixed. But there came a point when you could get them fixed a certain number of times, but then your feet grew and you had to buy new shoes. But, it was an awful business. We would go to, Pall Mall. Now, Pall Mall had a limited number of shoes available. And so what you would do, you would put the shoes on, and then you were supposed to walk up and down to get an indication of whether they fitted with reasonable comfort. But reasonable would be the word, because that would only seem to be so while you were in the Pall Mall. Because once you got home and you put these damn new shoes on, you could be sure you had a week or a fortnight, whatever it may have been, of blisters, because the shoes never fitted. Oh, I hated getting new shoes, even though from time to time I had to. But we would get them at Pall Mall. But, you can't imagine that Pall Mall had 1,000 shoes. They would have had, a couple of pairs of each size and so on. So you couldn't expect a great deal of choice. And if there wasn't much choice, there wasn't exactly scientific fitting. I remember going to Brisbane at one stage, I don't know when, but they had some sort of machine, and they measured your foot, how wide it was, how long it was. Oh, this was out of science fiction to me. But anyway, when you got those shoes, you got them at the Pall Mall. Now, maybe if we'd gone to Austin's and paid twice as much, we may have had a greater degree of choice. I don't know. I remember I was in India once, and I had to get a new pair of shoes for some reason or another. But we went into this shoe shop, and I was on my way back to Australia, and I went, let's want to get rid of that. That just said alarm. I don't know why there was an alarm there. Anyway, I had to buy these shoes. I was in New Delhi, and I needed these new shoes, and I didn't have a lot of money. I was flying back to Australia, and I still had a couple of places to go through before I got back to Brisbane. So, I had to be a little bit careful with the cash that I had, but I had to get these damn shoes. But anyway, I went into the shop, and you'd somehow know the select your shoe you wanted and the size, perhaps. But they had so many shoes You couldn't see them, of course, because they were kept upstairs, and the man downstairs would call out, and shoes would cascade in boxes down through a hole in the floor of the next level. Anyway, I got these shoes, tan pair as I recall. Well, they fitted me, I think, but that's not what I remember. I put them under my bed at night in the hotel, and they were the stinkiest shoes. They stank. I've heard of the stink of tanneries and so on. Well, I think it was the stink of the tannery that I had in those Indian shoes. Oh, bloody awful things. I did my money. I mean, even if they fitted, you couldn't wear them because you'd be unpopular. It was as if you had, what do they call that? Foul breath or something. God, the word doesn't come to me. But I've known a few people who've had it, And it was as if you had foul feet. Oh, it was an awful business. Okay, now let me get rid of this one here. Okay. Oh, yes. Here's a bit of scandal. I had an uncle, wonderful man, semi-saint, fellow called Jim Baldwin. He married my aunt, Lillian Bilby. But before he married her, he was a gallant around town, tall, handsome, and accommodating, I think. Accommodating would be the word for it. But when he was going to accommodate somebody, there was a certain degree of secrecy about it, But down on the corner, I think a block from down the street below Will Street, down along, you go down Galatea Street from Will Street, I think that's where it was. There was Dr. Shannassy's surgery, and particularly on the southern side of that block that he was in, there were very lush oleanders. Oh, they grew way out over what would have been the footpath had it been formed and so on. But when he would have an assignation, because of the secrecy involved, he would say to the femme, "Meet you in the oleanders outside Dr. Shannassy's." I dare say Dr. Shannassy's house is still there, and there's a damn good chance those oleanders will still be there. So each time you see those oleanders outside Dr. Shannassy's place, in the 40s and in the 30s, wouldn't have been the 40s, he was married and certainly faithful by then, one would hope. Around 30s, would he have been? Okay. Maybe early 30s, perhaps. That was a place of assignation. Well, the meeting place for the assignations, which I believe then moved on down to the riverbank, but I say no more about that. Okay, then. Now, I'll get rid of that one. Ah, yes. Now, this is something I don't think I mentioned, about the school. There was some talk, I think, late in the 19th century about putting gauze all around the verandas of the school, and which they did, because science had taught them that if you could limit the number of flies, you could probably reduce the amount of trachoma. And so some P&Cs paid to have the gauzing done. Others waited until the government did it. And now which was true of Charleville, I'm not quite sure. But by the time I got to the Charleville School, it was all gauzed in. But as you know, flies love perspiration. And we'd go out at lunchtime, in morning, at Levener. That was morning tea, Levener. When we go out at Levener, and maybe even when we came into school in the morning, I don't really know. But you can be sure that in summer, our shirts were fairly perspiring and so on. Well, flies love it. A million flies would be in the back of each person. And before we'd go up into class, we'd have to line up at the bottom of the steps. And then the teacher would come and we would be told to come upstairs. This may have been during the 11. No, it could have been at any time. Any time we were coming from the yard upstairs into the schoolroom. It was all gauzed in, the doors were closed and gauzed, and 2 people were appointed to hunt the flies. And so 2 people had the job of standing at the top of the steps, one part of the door would be open and you would go in through there. And as you were going, kids would slap your back. Maybe they would be on about the second top step. They'd slap your back and the flies would go away. And probably only about 10 or 20% of the flies would actually get in. But that was just a standard routine. 2 people were appointed at the top of each steps to hunt the flies. Slap, slap. And what good fun it was, I can tell you. Not that I don't think I was ever appointed as a fly swatter. Maybe the people at the bottom of the class got those jobs. I do not know. Okay, then. Of course, sometimes, I used to sit in the front row. You know how we used to be sat in class. You'd have exams and you'd get first place, second place, third place, right through to about number 51 or something like that. And number 1 would sit in the far back corner as the teacher faced the class on the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, second row. 11, 12, 13, 14, and so on. On we go. Now, I should have been up in that back row, you see. Apart from occasional poor performance or something. Not very often, but, sometimes. I don't know why. Maybe it was a plot against me, I don't know. But anyway, what was not a plot against me was certainly the fact that from time to time I used to be guilty of the sin of talking. And maybe I talked so much from time to time, or maybe I was, in a sense, gently defiant, in that I would continue to talk. Bray Bilby, be quiet, stop that talking. Well, sometimes I would boil over because I couldn't resist passing on a confidence to whoever may be beside me. Bray Bilby, come and sit in the front row. And so occasionally I'd have to sit down there with the dunces, as they were known as, and I'd have to sit in the front row, in the middle, I think where the teacher could get a good clout at me, for talking. Oh, it was a sin. Oh, well, anyway, we were good on the teachers, but still. It developed character in me, that's for sure. I should have become a Cistercian, I think. If I'd become a Cistercian, no, I would have been thrown out because I would have talked. But they wanted me to be a Cistercian. Who wants to be a Cistercian in Charleville in the 1940s? Certainly not me. That was for sure. Anyway, no great silence for me. Now, I told you about Lizzie falling in her bustle and train and her long skirt into the gutter outside Fitzwalter's. Okay, but I'm pretty sure that the reason for the gap between the gutter and what was called the footpath was in fact that there, in the early 1900s, and certainly in the 40s outside the Dalton, you didn't walk on cement. See, if you came from the town hall down to the beginning of the Dalton, you walked on cement. And if you're on the other side of the road, on the northern side, you walked on cement also. But I'm fairly sure that in the 40s, you didn't walk on cement outside the Dalton because it was what was known in American lingo, I think, as the boardwalk. You walked on boards. There was a footpath made of boards. Now, whether those boards went all the way down to Alfred Street, I'm not sure. But certainly on the corner of Alfred Street, you walked on boards. And I think that Lizzie fell off the boards outside Fitzwalter's and Alfred Street, went over into the gutter, A over T, as I say. I think I used French last time. I apologise to anyone who may have been offended. Okay. But there was a boardwalk. Now, you don't see boardwalks these days, but certainly there were boardwalks there in the 40s outside the Dalton. And I think that Auntie Mary told me, my old Aunt Mary, dead now, dear lady, passed on, Oh, when did she pass on? In the 80s, I think. No. Late 80s it would have been that she passed on, I would have thought. Oh, God, she was a talker, that one. Anyway, she told me the story, and I think she mentioned the boardwalk, and that's why Lizzie fell over into the gutter from the boardwalk. I don't know, she must have been wearing sort of Pall Mall shoes or boots or something like that. Anyway, she lost her balance, and over she went. Okay. Oh, and when I mentioned I forgot in the last production, I went from the Charleville Times office, and then I moved straight up to Block 6, Allotment 6, with the swimming pool and the skating rink and the what do they call the thing? The croquet club. Okay, but I forgot in between there. There was the old Merway Shire office. It was an ugly bloody building. I don't know when they built it, but there was no brilliance of architecture, and I don't think they spent a lot of money. It did nothing for the town of Court at all. It was, and so we had the Charleville Town Council, and it had those glorious chambers, town council chambers. Oh, that was sophisticated. But the Merway Shire, we used to think the Merway Shire was a sort of, bushwhacker country organisation. They had this shitty-looking building down there in Alfred Street. Well, of course, now they've got a palace because, they're the top dogs. And I also forgot to mention, that the reason, after the town hall was built on the site of the School of Arts. Now, they did eventually get the School of Arts built, but it didn't last all that long, because it too went up in a fire. And the old, I forget his name. What's his name? Wilson. I'm not quite sure about that one. If I say Wilson, it's because I'm remembering something that I read, 10, 15 years ago. But he was the caretaker or whatever, and he was burnt in the fire. He was in the building at the time, and the doors were open, and whoosh, he was taken in the flames. Okay, so, but by that time, of course, the School of Arts Hotel had taken the School of Arts name, and then subsequently, after the School of Arts burnt down, I think then must have come the Charleville Town Council. I wouldn't swear to that sequence, I wouldn't swear to it in the court, but I think that's fairly true. Okay, then. Now, where do I have a look up here? What do I got here? Oh, yes, I did. I forgot to mention, the ladies who went to croquet were generally of the elite. There were no ladies from Lower King Street attended croquet. Because if you attended croquet, you had to have certain characteristics. You had to be one of the genteel ladies. You had to be prepared to wear a broad width white frock, white stockings, white shoes, and I think you must have carried a mallet in your hand, and I think you might have carried something in a little case, I think. I'm not quite sure about that one. But as I said in one of my presentations, you had also to be ample of bosom, ample of whatever one would call bum. Oh, they were 1.5 axe handles wide for the most part. Oh, dear. Oh, Mrs. Harriman was, she wasn't really big, but Mrs. Espy, I think, was certainly ample. But I think most of them were fairly ample. But they did begin, though, down there opposite near the railway station. And I don't know how long they were there. They could have been there only a few years, because then they moved then moved up to where in Alfred Street there, but they probably called themselves the Victoria Croquet Club or something like that, because they used the name Victoria a lot there because it had been the site of Victoria Hotel. So it was the Victoria Baths, probably the Victoria Skating Rink, and probably the Victoria Croquet Green or whatever. They began under a different name down there in the corner of King and Will Street. But anyway, good for them. They could have sat at home gossiping, and they chose not to do that. They probably gossiped on the green, you see. Okay, then. Now, what was this one? Now, I'm going to try to get that list of fires accurate. Now, I'm going to go down the street, and some of them I'm certain about, some of them I'm a bit, a little bit vague about. These are the miscellaneous fires. Okay, now I'm going to begin at the railway station. I'll begin at the railway station. The railway station burnt down. You go over the road and the railway hotel burnt down. You move down and the school burnt down. You move down to Harriman's, Cobb & Co. burnt down. Later on, when Harriman's became a produce agency, it burnt down. in what was that year? About 1915, 1916. Yes, I remember. 1915, in December of 1915, the Catholic Presbytery burnt down, and lo and behold, in April 1916, the Church of England Presbytery burnt down. Aroused some degree of suspicion, I can tell you. Okay, then. Okay. Then the Catholic Church burnt down. We go over there and we come to there, and then the School of Arts burnt down. We move along a bit further. Coronis didn't burn down, nor did any of the Pall Mall block burn down. Then we come into the next block, and then on one side, the whole of the Dalton burnt down, and if you go around the corner, the Telegraph burnt down. On the opposite side of the street, the Charleville burnt down several times. Okay, the most interesting fire was the 1931 one. Now, every now and then, when you read an article in Trove, you should always keep a record of every single article that you read that's got something in it that attracts your attention. Now, I read an article in Trove about the 1931 fire. There were quite a number of articles about the 1931 fire, mostly heroics and the fire brigade and bravery and all that type of thing, But there was one other article that I recall, and I've never been. I didn't dream it, I can assure you of that, because I believe that we were personally involved. It was a family thing, you see. And anyway, there was this article that I've never been able to find it since. Maybe it's on the, one of the indexes, maybe. Oh dear. The forbidden reading. But anyway, I can't find it again. But anyway, this report described the scene. The fire was blazing. People were trying to save what could be saved. And, there were all sorts of fine-hearted people, brave people, who were trying to get stuff out of the Charleville Hotel. But it would appear from the report that the party of rescuers fell into two categories. One category were those who were trying honestly to remove the items out of a sense of duty to the owner and the town. But there was another group who were equally and probably more feverishly removing items from the hotel to purloin them. Well, I'm reading this, very respectable being that I am, some years on, and I thought, there were two groups. Now, which group would my family have been in? Would they have been among the noble group, or would they have been purloining with as much speed and energy as they could muster? I leave you to decide. I was always torn. I could never really tell, what they may have done, but I had my suspicions, of course. Okay, then. Now, let me see. Now, wait a minute. Yes, I haven't finished with the fires as yet. Okay. Now, along Alfred Street, there were miscellaneous grand fires. There was that one where about 6 shops were burnt. And, that was the one that was caused, I think, by the cat knocking the candle over. I don't know whether Fitzwalters ever went down. We go up a little bit and, no. Okay, so then we came up to the Victoria Hotel. The Victoria Hotel, that was burnt down in 1916. The Metropolitan Hotel, I think that was burnt down in, now I've just got a figure in my head, but I can't guarantee it, about 1894, but I'm not sure about that one. And then that followed with the Commercial Hotel, I think that burned down in 1901. There was a fire in the cattle camp at one stage. Maybe it was a fire in Hope, I'm not quite sure. But I don't think the hotel wasn't burned down, but it did begin in the inquest, it was said, in an unoccupied room about 2 a.m. Well, a great number of them began in unoccupied rooms about 2 a.m. Okay, well, now let's move around a bit. Now, we better come down here to... okay. Now, Bell's never burnt down. No, that's one of the few. Bells didn't burn down, and Coronis never burned down. Oh, certainly the Telegraph burned down. I think I mentioned that one. Um, but Tats nearly burnt down. I had thought it had totally burnt down, but it nearly burnt down. But that was one of the ones where, in the inquest, um, it wasn't so much. It wasn't a blaze under mysterious circumstances, because most of the characteristics of that fire were revealed. Two fires broke out almost simultaneously, one in the boudoir of mine host and mine hostess. But it would appear, though, that fire was the cause of or was caused by a marital dispute. And he said, "You bitch, you're burning me out." And he was going to get at the police, but he came back and they made up. And nothing much happened about it, But that was, the circumstances there were not very mysterious. Okay, then. Now, wait a minute, now let me think. Oh, yes. Of course, occasionally houses burnt down, but sort of public buildings, if you like, well insured, burnt down more often than private houses. But there was a private house, burnt down diagonally opposite the ambulance station. But that was a fire, well, should I say, maybe it was regarded as being mysterious or caused by the cat or whatever. I'm not quite sure. But we know what happened. Oh, I shouldn't say that. Somebody I know said she knows what happened. You see, there were a couple living there. I'm not saying who. The marriage took place possibly in haste, I'm not sure. That was the usual thing, of course. Of course, it was so much in haste. There was a practice in town where, most people in the town weren't invited to the wedding. But there was a certain group of ladies in town who attended every wedding. They didn't go into the church, of course, or they didn't go to the reception, but they certainly stood outside, just to be sure that the wedding had actually taken place. Then they would go home and they would mark the date on the calendar. And then they'd mark 9 months later, and if a birth happened before then, they knew what had been going on. Oh, it was quite common. I could name names, but I won't. Okay. But let me return to that building that burnt on the corner, diagonally opposite the ambulance station. This young couple had been married, but apparently the mother of the bride didn't like the groom very much at all. Why? I cannot imagine. He was certainly born on this side of the line. But anyway, I don't think the mother-in-law liked him. The mother-in-law was known as a bit of an old gossip around town, I won't name her name. But still, she lived there, near there. But anyway, she didn't like this wedding. She wanted to break the marriage up. It may or may not have been a marriage made in heaven. But in the eyes of the bride and groom, it was maybe sufficiently harmonious, temporarily, until I might add the arrival of the American Air Force, which caused a certain degree of, shall we say, disharmony and dissolution. Okay. However, before that, they lived in this house on the corner, diagonally opposite the ambulance station. And while they were at the pictures that one night, the house went up. Well, you may have thought it was the cat, you may have thought it was the mice. Any of those things are possible. However, I think there was some young child living with them at the time. And while everything else in the house was destroyed in the fire, miraculously, all of the child's clothing was later found, safe and sound, in the house of the mother-in-law. the story I heard was that the old so-and-so, she had put the red steer through that house. Anyway, the marriage did break up, but I don't know that it was necessarily because of the mother-in-law. I think it was because of the charms of an American Air Force man. Okay, so when you pass that house, it has a history. Okay, now let me see. I'll move on from there. Right, I've got that one there. Now I'm just having a look because these notes are in terrible order, you know. I've got the amateur. Oh, now wait a minute. Oh, yes. Here's a confession. Here is a confession never before made publicly. But actually, the person who told me about the background to the fire that I just spoke about also told me about this theft, a grand theft. Okay, then. This was, I don't know when that would have been. Must have been in the 20s, I would have thought. It had to be in the 20s. Yeah, because Lower King Street was in need of maybe we were in need of well, I think we would have had the water there by that time. But anyway, whatever. Maybe they didn't have bathrooms or something. I don't really know. But there was some problem. Anyway, Jackie, and I will name names at this point. Jackie Fagan. I think it was. I think she said Jackie Fagan. Jackie Fagan one day espied at the back of the Church of England a very large hose. Well, I don't know what the Church of England was doing with a very large hose. Maybe they pumped water from there was quite a deep pool behind the Church of England there in the river. Maybe they pumped water out of there for the yard, or maybe they were given to watering the yard. I don't really know. But there was a very large hose there. And Jackie Fagan, excuse me, Jackie Fagan espied this hose, and realised that it would do a community good, and a greater community good at the back of the Church of England. Now, I take it the hose was fairly lengthy, and I take it the hose was fairly heavy and fairly thick in gauge, you see. So now Jackie Fagan, remember, lived down there near the Gordons and the Bilbys, and he gathered together a party of Bilby boys who went up one night and assisted him to steal the hose from the Church of England. Then they brought it back down to King Street, and I don't know where they set it up. I think they set it up over there, maybe in Jackie Fagan's yard. But there was a cement slab there somehow or another, and everyone used to come over, and they would have, it was sort of like a party, I think, or perhaps a private show, I'm not quite sure. But it provided great entertainment for the people of King Street. And the young ones of King Street, either for private showers or for general sort of summer hosing, I think. But I don't know how long the hose lasted, but they were very grateful to the Church of England, you know. Well, for having bought the thing in the first place. But they were more grateful, of course, to Jackie Fagan for having rescued it from the Church of England. Oh, yes. Okay, then. Okay, just one moment.